Good evening, Bev. So EU elections are every 5 years, and every single EU country, EU member sends its national representatives to the EU Parliament. And in terms of what matter for EU citizens, the latest polls show clearly four different topics. The first one, as we can expect, is the cost of living, because like everywhere, the cost of life raise so much. The second one is immigration, because immigration is EU competency, and immigration management makes only sense at a EU level. The third topic that matters for EU citizens is what we could call external threats, because obviously the war between Ukraine and Russia is very and still topical for all the EU citizens. And the fourth really topic is everything related to technology, from intelligence, artificial intelligence, to data management, data privacy. Above all, after the EU Parliament has voted two very strong laws, the DMA and the DSA, regarding the management of data and privacy in Europe.
Yeah, so there's some big ticket items there. And, the first two you mentioned, of course, the cost of living and migration. These things are very linked at the moment because it's often felt as if migrants are taking away jobs and causing some of these issues. There's a lot of talk about growing support for the far right in this election. Has it been overblown, or do you think you are going to see an increase in that vote?
What is very interesting with both topics, cost of living and immigration, is that cost of living, in fact, mainly is something that EU doesn't have a huge impact on. It's really every country that can manage that. But as you mentioned, in fact, as you said, both cost of living and immigration issues really gave far-right parties in Europe a lot of things to say about it, and it's clearly sure that the far-right will gain seats at the next EU election, even if, and I think it's important to mention to our audience, even if there are internal disputes within the far-right parties in Europe that will limit automatically their influence. But it's clear that we will see a rise of far-right parties and an increase in terms of number of seats.
Yeah. Is it, though, expected that the centrist parties will still prevail?
What is expected is that the right and classic, I would say, right and conservative party will have a bit more than 170 seats, though that the party of the actual president of the Commission, Ursula von der Leyen. But the far-right parties, in fact, both the ECR and the ID, will both have around 75 parties. But as I said, at the moment, there are two distinct parties, so they have to find agreements if they really want to wait at the EU level.
Yeah. Ursula von der Leyen, do you think she will get back for a second term as European Commission President?
Definitely, Bev, Ursula von der Leyen will run for a second term at the head of the EU Commission. But it's not something that is easy to say now, because she has to go through a couple of different steps. The first one is that the EPP, her party, needs to win and have the highest number of seats at the EU Parliament. The second thing, she has to be nominated by a qualified majority of the leaders of all the EU countries. And last, Bev, but not least, she has to be approved by a majority of the 720 MEPs. So she's the natural candidate for the right at the EU level, but she has to go through a couple of different steps after the EU election this weekend.
Yeah, interesting. There has been quite a bit of concern around security and terror threats. Of course, we know the games are coming up in France, so that's a very tricky time for all people living in Paris. How much of a concern is it for these elections and generally across Europe, do you think?
Obviously, terrorism, safety issue is something that is very, I would say, topical at the moment, and no one wants to see a return into in the EU countries of terrorism. What is really clear also is that the venue in France of President Biden for the 80th birthday of D-Day led to an increase in terms of security measures and so and so. But more than that, what concerns really EU citizens and EU countries at the moment is interference of Russia within the EU election, because we have seen in the past national election some interferences and some actions from Russia trying to disturb, to bother what happened in the EU countries. So I think there's a really big concern about this election coming from the east of Europe.
Yeah, interesting. Natanael, really lovely to see you again, and it'll be a very interesting election as it plays out. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Bev.